Welcome to U.S. Law Shield's live webinar. I'm your host, Sam Malone, in Houston, Texas. Today, we've got the experienced professionals, the independent program attorneys, to come aboard live and answer your questions and answer a lot of questions out there on our topic, life after COVID-19 for the responsible gun owner. A lot of things have changed, as you know. A lot of the states opening up. We're blessed here in Texas. Our restaurants opened up about two and a half weeks ago. Bars open up this Friday. Summer camps will be opening up. Office buildings, soon government buildings. How have gun laws changed for responsible gun owners like us? Proud members of U.S. Law Shield, which I'm sure the majority of y'all watching, proud members. Look, here you go, look at that, right here. Proud to wear U.S. Law Shield on my shirt, under my blazer. Proud to have that membership card in my wallet. Why? Because U.S. Law Shield is, without a doubt, legal defense for your self-defense. At any time during this webinar, jump aboard their website, become a member, uslawshield.com/defend. Lots of educational moments like this on the website. There's benefits, of course, more seminars, everything you can imagine. Become a member. And of course, access 24/7 to that emergency hotline answered by an independent program attorney with advice in your state. Now, let's get to these independent program attorneys standing by from across the country. Let's see, Gil Ambler is with us on our webinar. Gil, good to have you aboard.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
And of course, Matt Killigo, both longtime friends and independent program attorneys at U.S. Law Shield. Good to have you aboard.
Good to see you, Sam. You're the best looking man on video.
Thank you very much. Wait, do you want me to flash the logo again? Right here. Right here. We'll start with you. Let's see. Gil, we'll go to you first. And let's start with kind of getting back to, quote, normal. Churches opening up soon. What do gun owners need to remember, especially when it comes to going to places that are, quote, dual facility? You got vacation Bible schools opening up and Bible camps and stuff. Give us your take on things.
Sure. As we inch back towards normalcy, many of us have to remember the rules because we're starting to go back to in-person attending church services, and that means we've got to pay attention. And one of the things we need to pay attention to, and this certainly differs on a state-by-state basis, is whether we have a school attached to our church and how that definition might be perceived by the church. So one of the most important things that I can say is that you need to figure out if you have a church and that you're going to that has a school attached, and that might be a public, private, or religious K through 12 school. Those school grounds are likely going to be prohibited from possessing a firearm, not just during church hours, not just during school hours, but during church hours as well.
And Matt, jump in on this one because you're in Georgia, independent program attorney, U.S. Law Shield. What do you want to add to that?
That's absolutely right. Gil's right on the money. If your church has a school in it, your church is a school, which means that you have to abide by the Georgia state rules when it comes to carrying on school property, carrying only in the car when picking up or dropping off, or leaving it in the car when you go into the school. Now, another important thing to remember is nationwide, we do have school safety zone issues. Federally, I'm allowed to drive through a school zone in my state if I have a weapons carry license. However, if I go to another state, I'm probably not, and the law says not protected as a gun owner if you're driving through another state's school zone. So you have to be very careful and be very aware of where you are at all times.
And Matt, sticking with you in Georgia, is a school that has a child care facility during a service considered like a school if they just watch kids there? Same rules and regs?
A church, not necessarily. If it's just care during the service, that's one thing. If it's actually a private elementary school or secondary school, that would be considered a school. If you're paying to go there, I think that's what we would consider a school, and in that case, you could run into trouble.
Sticking with you, Matt, government facilities opening up soon, especially here in Texas and around the country. Are there some national carry laws and restrictions that we need to remember as responsible gun owners?
Absolutely. Let's break it down federal and state. Federally, there are just some places you can't carry. If you're treated at the VA, you can't carry into the VA or even the parking lot. Post office, if you're dropping off your letters and your cards, really you shouldn't be on postal property with a firearm. Now, state to state, the rules on government buildings will change. Here in Georgia, with a weapons carry license, you can carry into a government building so long as it's not a courthouse or a jail, if it's a government building that does not have law enforcement screening. So you have to know where you are, where you're going, and you've got to know those rules. For instance, Sam, and I'll hang on this for just one moment, in Georgia with a weapons carry license, you can carry a handgun into a state park, which means the federal rule follows the law of the state in which the park's located. Therefore, I could go onto federal park grounds, Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park, for instance, with a firearm, but I could not carry it into the visitor center because that's a federal building, no guns in the building.
Wow. Gil, jump over to you in Virginia. What do you want to add to that?
So I think it's a good answer by Matt, and two things that I picked up on that I wanted to mention here. He talked about post offices, and it's one of the areas that commonly trips people up, because when we talk about post offices, we need to remember that it's not just the post office itself that is prohibited under federal law. It's also going to be the parking lot and sidewalk surrounding that post office, and something that gun owners commonly forget. They pull in, they realize they're going to the post office, they say, oh, I'll leave my gun in the vehicle, and they'll walk into the post office, and it's still a violation of federal law in most cases. And so something we really need to plan our trips out ahead of time.
Wow.
The other thing that Matt talked about that I think is important and worth reiterating is that all of this changes on a state-by-state basis. So we can address federal rules that are going to be unanimous and uniform throughout the 50 states. You also need to be aware of every state's restrictions. And so as gun owners, we might be very, very familiar with what's taking place in our home state, but we need to be equally certain when we travel that we're honoring the laws of the state that we are currently in. So we have to learn and pay attention, be educated before taking that trip to make sure we don't mess up and accidentally or unintentionally violate the laws of whatever state we have traveled to.
Amen to that. Gil, coming back to you for a second, well, and obviously in Virginia, is there a backlog of the license to carry permits and things like that in your state?
So this is certainly unprecedented times, and what we're seeing is that it's varying county by county. So some counties are really doing a good job and have procedures in place that have opened it up, and they're getting through the carry permit applications in the time mandated by statute. And then we're seeing other counties, and I'm hearing reports from other counties that people are being pushed back and turned away, and their rights are frankly, in some cases, being violated. And so it's something that seems to depend where people are going and what part of the state. And I think we're hearing, and the same thing is being echoed on a national basis, different states are handling things differently. And some states are doing a very, very good job staying on top of everything, while other states are not doing quite as good a job.
Got that right. We're going back to work. By the way, you're watching our webinar live, U.S. Law Shield, and I'm with experienced professionals, Indian pregnant attorneys, Gil Ambler and Matt Kilgo. Matt, let me jump to you. A lot of people going back to work. For instance, in Texas, the governor said, buildings are open at a certain percentage, but, you're going back to work. What do you need to remember? What do you need to know when it comes to having your gun on you, whether it's open or concealed, and you're going back into the office building?
You need to remember in your state your most basic carry rules, and you need to know what the rights are of the employer that you're going to visit every day. For instance, here in Georgia, the employer is treated as the owner of the building, and the employer can exclude you or eject you. Now, the employer in Georgia can't keep you from bringing a firearm and leaving it in your personal vehicle if you have a weapons carry license and it's tucked out of sight. But if you violate that, Georgia's still a work at will state, which means the employer can fire you. So I think what's important for folks to remember, the most basic carry rules, and specifically how each state addresses those carry rules in a place of business, including, does the employer have the right to absolutely forbid you? Sam, I know that the state of Texas has signs that you can placard, which means you can't carry in at all. Georgia doesn't have that, but you need to know in your state what those rules are, and specifically what your employer could do if you're found with that firearm.
And Gil, what about you in Virginia? People are going back to work in Roanoke and Richmond and wherever they are, and they're coming back to work. What do they need to know?
Sure. So when we're talking about private employers and private businesses, we need to remember that the Second Amendment and the very important Second Amendment and state constitutional protections that we have protect you from government violation of your rights. And that means that private employers can still make determinations for their workplace, can still set rules for their workplace, and can still prohibit firearms in their workplace. And so it's something that law-abiding gun owners need to balance. They need to balance their individual rights and their safety with the desires and demands of their employers. And it can often be a difficult balancing act, and we regularly speak with people that are trying to figure out just how to navigate that uncertainty.
And Gil, let's stick with you. You're Virginia. You got some beaches down there. Virginia's for lovers, I guess, and beautiful beaches and sands. I want to bring my gun to the beach. I feel like I may need it. Maybe I've got a nice watch or something like that when it comes to not just the parks, but what do I need to remember about, and I've got my license to carry, right? And I'm going to the beach. Walk me through it.
So in Virginia right now, we have to remember a couple things. Generally speaking, Virginia is an open carry state. So if you're in your bathing suit and you want to open carry that firearm and take it to the beach, be careful with salt water, obviously. Firearms and salt water don't mix well. But you can, generally speaking, you can carry that firearm. You need to remember that state buildings are going to be prohibited. So buildings under the control of the executive branch. So if you're seeing buildings like that near the beach, that's something to be aware of. You can't carry your firearm in those buildings. You also need to remember that laws are currently changing in Virginia. We've had a lot of change happening, and one of those changes will allow localities to begin making their own gun laws and their own rules. And that's something else that, as we start to head back towards normalcy, we're also going to have to face these new gun laws and new rules and ordinances popping up. And so we need to figure out what local towns and localities might be enforcing and make sure that we abide by those rules as well.
Matt, jump in on that. In Georgia, the same kind of situation?
Thankfully, no. Georgia has a state preemption doctrine which prohibits local jurisdictions from making more restrictive firearm rules. Now, they can prohibit you from discharging a firearm within the county or the city limits, but that's pretty much it. I would agree with Gil. Definitely take care if you're carrying to the beach. One thing I think nationally we all need to remember, if it's at the beach or if it's at a park, if that park has water, make sure that that park is not controlled by the Army Corps of Engineers. Because if the Army Corps of Engineers controls that state park, controls that waterway, they have heightened restrictions on the use of handguns. Now, some of those restrictions are being lessened, but right now, if you're deciding where to travel, make sure you know that so you don't fall on the wrong side of the law.
Matt Kilgo, independent program attorney, U.S. Law Shield, an experienced professional. Okay, you mentioned travel, and you're in Georgia and you want to take a car trip somewhere. What should people remember when you have your license to carry, or whatever the license is called in your state, CHL, what have you. What do you need to keep in mind when you're getting in the car, taking a car trip?
Well, in Georgia, we call it a weapons carry license, and you actually don't need one in the car if you're eligible to possess a firearm. You can carry it anywhere in the vehicle, loaded, unloaded, openly, or concealed, and that would also apply to any individual who's traveling through our state. Now, Georgia has reciprocity with 34 other states, which means that we recognize their state's licenses just as we recognize a Georgia license. But in other words, you wouldn't even necessarily need that so long as you are otherwise eligible to possess that license. Now, if you're traveling through Georgia and the place where you started your lawful to carry and the place where you complete your journey your lawful to carry, federal law, the Firearm Owners Protection Act, also protects you so long as you're traveling. If you stop overnight, you're not necessarily traveling anymore. You have to keep the firearm separate from ammunition in a locked case and inaccessible from the passenger compartment of the vehicle. Now, if you decide you want to fly, and virtually everyone in the world flies through Atlanta at some point, you can still fly with a firearm. You have to check it. There's a certain process and procedure that you have to go through. And whatever you do, don't fly to New York or New Jersey.
Well said. Jump over to Gil. You are on the East Coast and you want to take a ride and you want to go westbound and visit the great red state of Texas. What do we need to know?
Sure. So as Matt already addressed, when we're traveling outside of our home state, we need to understand the reciprocity rules for every state that we're going to be passing through. So we need to understand whether our Virginia concealed handgun permit or if you're from a little bit further north, your Pennsylvania license to carry firearms or whatever your state equivalent might be, whether that is going to be recognized in every state that you're passing through. So that's the first thing that we need to encounter. And the second determination we need to make is if we're not going to have a license or permit that is recognized, so we're not going to be legally able to carry a loaded firearm, can we go through under the Safe Passage Act, which was what the federal law was that Matt was referencing. And the Federal Safe Passage Act allows us to travel, as Matt said, so long as we're not staying overnight with the firearm unloaded and secured, with the ammunition separated. Now, when you begin staying overnight, you lose those protections. And so that's very, very important for travelers to consider as they begin planning a trip, to figure out where they might want to make their stops, to make sure that they can make stops in a manner that keeps them compliant with both state and federal laws.
Excellent. Gil Ambler, great tips for traveling. Matt Kilgo, excellent tips. These two are independent program attorneys with U.S. Law Shield. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on our webinar tonight. Coming up, we'll be taking some of your selected questions and bringing them to more independent program attorneys with U.S. Law Shield. If you're not a member yet, what are you waiting for? Go online, uslawshield.com/defend, and join. Get the benefits, get the education, get the discounts, and most importantly, get that legal defense for your self-defense. As they used to say with that credit card, don't leave home without it. Coming up, we'll be taking some of your selected questions with more independent program attorneys. But in the meantime, let's get important health reminders. Why? Because we're trying to get the COVID-19 in the rear view mirror. Plenty of things to keep in mind medically. Dr. Rick Hemisfar, MD, is here with us with health tips.
Hey, what's going on down there?
Call the police!
U.S. Law Shield Emergency Hotline. What's your emergency?
One call away, 24/7, 365.
So if you go to an indoor range, how could you possibly get contaminated? It's very simple. You either touch something or you're breathing in somebody else's air. That's all there is to it. So you want to go through and think about how you want to handle touching things inside the store and inside the range. Do you want to wear gloves, or you just want to do a lot of hand sanitizer? And those are about the only two ways of dealing with this. Then as far as staying away from people, that's a social distancing. That's staying 6 feet away. So don't stand too close in the checkout lines. Don't stand too close around the countertops. Just try to maintain that 6 foot distance so that if the person in front of you or around you is asymptomatic but carrying the virus, when he breathes out and exhales, he's exhaling the virus. Well, you don't want to breathe it in. So one way is to wear a mask. But the only masks that really protect you when you inhale are the N95s. Wearing a mask may not be practical in all cases. In that case, you're down to social distancing. So now we're through the store and we're into the range. And here's where the problem gets a little more complex, because the ranges are very close together. The average lane is 4 feet center to center. And that's obviously well within the 6 foot distancing, social distancing concept. That partition that sits between the lanes really does not do any good, because the airflow is such inside a range that if somebody next to you is exhaling the virus, it will basically just float around the partitions. So you want to be aware of that fact. And ideally you're using a range where they're placing shooters in every other lane rather than every lane. But even if they're using every other lane, we all know that sometimes there are multiple shooters on one lane. And so the 6 foot distancing may still be difficult to maintain. So just be aware of that. Now, if somebody does have the virus and is exhaling, that virus in the respiratory droplet will settle on the floor or settle on the bench. So what we all do is take our bags and we just drop them on the floor. Well, if we do that, the bag ends up contaminated. So probably the best way of dealing with this is trying to keep things off the bench, or rather off the floor, and put some type of covering down on the bench, whether it be plastic, whether it be some paper towel layers, but something where we can cover the bench and then put our equipment on it. And hopefully that'll keep our equipment from getting contaminated. Then you also want to be aware of the fact that if you start trading weapons, if that fellow next to you wants to see how the RMR functions on your particular weapon, and you trade weapons, well, now that weapon is potentially contaminated, and at some point you're going to have to decon that weapon according to the manufacturer specifications. But here is the biggest lapse: eye pro and ear pro. Anytime your hands go near your face, you have to have the hands clean. So you have to use hand sanitizer before you put on eye pro, before you put on ear pro, and then put it on. And anytime you adjust it, anytime you take them off, you have to use hand sanitizer first. And whatever you do, don't take your ear pro and don't take your eye pro and lay it down on a counter where that can get contaminated. So you want to be aware that the ear pro and the eye pro always go from the bag to your face with clean hands and then right back in the bag to try to keep those items from being contaminated at all. And that's basically the best way of enjoying yourself at a range and hopefully not getting contaminated and still staying healthy. One last thing, once you're out of the range and you're back in your car, be sure to use hand sanitizer and think about the potential breaks in contamination. Is there any way that the bags could have been contaminated, your weapons could have been contaminated? And just think about that. And hopefully by doing these things, social distancing, the hand sanitizer, being aware of what's going on, and most importantly, keeping dirty hands away from your face, we'll all be able to shoot, have fun, and stay healthy. Well, that's it for this particular podcast. If you have any questions, please email me below. I'll get to those questions as quickly as possible in future episodes. But thank you, enjoy your shooting, and stay healthy.
Firearms are a part of my daily life. My office is the gun range. When I'm competing, it's in a safe and controlled environment. But out in the real world, I'm vulnerable, just like you. I'm exposed to the same threats, and I abide by the same laws. With US Law Shield, they take care of me. I know I'm protected if I ever need to defend myself, and they educate me on the legal ability to do so. And that's why my everyday carry consists of 3 critical items: my gun, my phone, and my US Law Shield card. Training gives me peace of mind on the range, and Law Shield, well, they give me peace of mind off the range. I'm Jessie Harrison, world and national champion pistol shooter, and proud member of US Law Shield.
Let's continue on with our webinar with US Law Shield, Life After COVID-19 for the responsible gun owner. That responsible gun owner, like myself, proud member, US Law Shield. You saw the swag and the bobblehead in there. It's a great thing to be part of this family for all of the benefits, all the bennies. But the bottom line is legal defense for your self-defense. I love, as they say, quote, you defend your life, they'll defend your freedom. And that comes from the experienced professionals, great independent program attorneys at US Law Shield, and longtime friends Richard Hayes and Emily Taylor. Richard, sir, welcome aboard.
Good to see you, Sam, as always.
Thank you. And Emily, as always, a longtime friend of many years. Great to have you aboard.
Oh, it's good to see you, Sam.
Emily, we'll start with you. First of all, this segment, we have pre-collected questions that have come in. And we'll start with you about, you're in Texas, Mr. Hayes is in Texas, I'm in Texas. Whoop! The last time we talked, we were being forced to wear a mask. We actually had legislation, luckily it was thrown out, that said if you walk out of the house without a mask, you could go to jail for 6 months and get a $1,000 fine. It was kooky. But people want to know, forced to wear a mask, how could that affect someone's right, and we'll talk about in Texas, the right to have a license to carry?
Yeah, so carrying while wearing a mask is actually one of those issues that first of all, constantly changing because of, as you mentioned, the sort of issues we have here in Texas. And in some states, more black and white, but in some states, very, very difficult. So let's take a state like, let's say, I believe North Carolina, Washington. They will not let you carry while you're wearing a mask. That would be a crime in and of itself. Now, while the Harris County order was in effect, it would actually have been a crime to not wear a mask while carrying, which if that doesn't tell you that our legal system is kind of messed up, that you could commit two different crimes by committing the opposite actions across the country, then that should give you a little bit of a hint as to what our legal system looks like here. You're absolutely right. Governor Abbott's order did supersede what we had here in Harris County. Luckily, it appears that Harris County authorities aren't interested in arresting people to test that to see if they in fact could go ahead and make the arrest and get a conviction despite the governor's order. But it really is just a mess, not just in Texas, but all over the country.
I'll say, and Richard Hayes also in Texas, there was a woman with a nail spa thrown in jail. The judge said to her, you need to apologize for being selfish. There was a bar in West Odessa raided by SWAT for opening. What a mess, Mr. Hayes.
Yeah, some people had to get their ears lowered despite the order in place. But there's something that I want to warn all gun owners. Doesn't matter what state you're in, this will apply to you. Whatever the law is at the time, remember, private entities can still require you wear a mask in order to do business with them. And this is something gun owners need to be especially cautious of because, we carry this gun, we protect ourselves, and sometimes it frightens people. And so remember, in most states, it's going to be a trespass. If somebody says, hey, you can't come in here without a mask, and you do, then you're going to be trespassing because you're entering when, entry is forbidden. And in some states, it makes it even worse if you're carrying a firearm, so be very careful.
And with Mr. Hayes and Emily and stuff, you get access to independent program attorneys like this, members only. The number's on the back of your member card, and gosh forbid you need them. They are standing by. Let me get to, Mr. Hayes, we'll stick with you. So many people bought guns during the COVID-19 event. They called it the gun run. Kyle P. Has this question. They bought a gun during COVID, but he does not have a gun safe. What storage and safety considerations should he be aware of, Mr. Hayes?
Well, it's a really important question that a lot of gun owners should take seriously. We all know the best practices: have a gun safe, have it properly installed, secure to your flooring. We know all of that. What's most important is, not letting your firearms fall in the hands of criminals, prohibited persons, intoxicated people, children. We know all that stuff. You don't want your guns falling into the wrong hands. A lot of states have some very strict storage requirements, so you got to know the law in your state. But say you don't live with anybody else, it's just you and your house. Just take common sense steps to prevent a theft, if your house is burglarized, things like that. Follow your state storage requirements, but really, in that scenario, you're really worried about theft and burglary.
Emily Taylor, independent program attorney. You're also in Texas. What do you want to add to that? Kyle buys a gun, but doesn't have a safe.
Yeah, so Richard mentioned, and it's really exactly what people need to do. There's a legal component and there's a common sense component. So the legal component being check and see. For example, in Texas, the requirement is you cannot have a readily dischargeable firearm accessible to a child. In other states, the requirement is more strict. In some other states, it's more lenient. In Texas, we're talking about leaving loaded firearms accessible. So that's your legal requirement. Of course, your common sense requirement is how old is the child in my house? What do I need to do to make sure it's not accessible? And then in the situation that Richard mentioned, which is you live alone and you're just simply trying to prevent theft and burglary, of course, make sure that if you have a first floor bedroom, don't leave that pistol on the top of your nightstand with the windows open so that a thief could walk by and see that it's there and know that if they break into your home, they can find a gun. So there's really two considerations people need to think about.
Emily Taylor, independent program attorney, U.S. Law Shield. She's in Texas. I'm in Texas. You're watching Life After COVID-19 for the responsible gun owner. And Emily, speaking of responsible, Dennis G., his question is, if I'm involved in a life-threatening situation with my firearm, what's the first thing I should do after I shoot? Emily.
Yes. Well, Dennis, I'll do you one better, and I'll tell you the first three things. So number one is make sure you're safe, right? Before you think about anything else, make sure the threat is contained and make sure that you are not in danger. Number two is call 911, but give them only the bare minimum information. This is my name. This is where I'm located. This is what I'm wearing. I have been the victim of a home invasion. I've been the victim of a robbery. I've been the victim of an attempted sexual assault. That's what scares, us ladies when we're home alone. So you've got all of these things. Even if you shot the person, make sure that you are presenting to 911 as, I am the victim of what they tried to do to you. My personal recommendation is don't tell 911 you have a gun. Don't tell 911 you shot them. The police will figure that out when they get there. But you definitely don't want, so much of this is about, Richard and I are lawyers, but a lot of what we think about, because we're trial lawyers, is the psychology of things. Not just jury psychology, but the psychology of police officers. And so you do not want those police officers responding thinking, I'm going to see Sam alone because he shot someone. We want, I'm going to see Sam because someone broke into his house. And that's very important in terms of how they treat the investigation. Now, of course, the third step that I promised is call an attorney. If you're not a Law Shield member, that's fine. But you've got to make sure that you have a criminal defense attorney who knows guns and knows self-defense, who will answer that phone call from you at 2 or 3 in the morning.
Hey, thanks for dragging me into this. Appreciate it. No, I'm not being dragged into it. No, but thank you for putting my name in there. And what Emily kind of mentioned before I get to Mr. Hayes for his take on things is when you are a member, like I am, of U.S. Law Shield, you got the 24/7, 365-day access to an attorney-answered emergency hotline. It's answered by an independent program attorney in your state. Like I'm in Texas, go to Richard Hayes, also in Texas. So what do you want to add to what Emily said, minus my name being part of this? The three important things to take care of, which I would think, I'm just a civilian, there was a shooting, I'm reporting a shooting. As Emily said, Mr. Hayes, no, just say you were the victim of a crime or what have you.
Yeah, and this is something I think a lot of folks neglect because we all go to the range, we practice, we become proficient in the use of our firearms, drawing our firearm, drawing our handgun, all those things. But they don't think about the next step. What happens after I've stopped the threat, the situation is contained? And I like to keep things as simple as possible. Emily went through them, but I have to emphasize, it's 5 steps. Calling 911. Second, location. Third, services needed, usually police and EMS. Fourth, truthful statement about the defensive incident. I was the victim of a crime. I had to defend myself. Somebody kicked down my door. I had to defend my family. Fifth step, hang up the phone. Don't stand on the line with 911. Everything that you say is being recorded, and it can be used against you. You have to hang up the phone. They're going to try to call you back. You're not required to answer their call. But after that, speak to an attorney. And this whole defensive incident, maybe it happened in mere seconds. The legal aftermath can take years, and that is why it's so important to be proactive, have an attorney in your corner, and start handling it right away.
Richard Hayes, independent program attorney, U.S. Law Shield, staying with you. If I wanted to travel from Texas, we are a very 2A friendly state, but I don't know, I want to go to New York, Philadelphia, Florida maybe. What do I need to know when traveling, and restrictions and any new restrictions, or has anything changed with COVID-19, Mr. Hayes?
Not a whole heck of a lot has changed. I will tell you, don't take your gun to New York. I think Matt Kilgo told you that on the first segment. Don't take your gun to New York. Don't take ammunition to New York. But in those states that either recognize your Texas license to carry or your home state's license or permit to carry, follow that state's rules when you're there. If you're passing through one of these hostile states, Illinois, for example, and you're passing directly through, then as they discussed earlier, you want the protection of the Firearms Owners Protection Act, 18 U.S.C. 926A, firearms unloaded, stowed, inaccessible to the driver, locked up, ammunition separate, passing directly to, not stopping for detours or delays, not sightseeing, passing straight through that. And then you would have available to you a defense in case you were, charged with a state gun crime in Illinois, in our example. So if you're passing through a hostile state, make sure to brush up on the Firearm Owners Protection Act. Otherwise, follow the state's law when you get there. And, one of those benefits, and I talk to members all the time coming from different places. They want to know, hey, how can I legally carry here in Texas? And we give them a rundown, and they really appreciate it. And we welcome everybody to come visit us here in Texas.
Excellent. Let me get to Emily. Emily, Richard just said it. Matt said it earlier. These big warnings about don't take a gun to New York. What would happen? What do I need to know?
Immediate arrest for a felony is what would happen. It's not good. That's why, an ounce of preparation, and that's really the key. We don't want you to be a legal expert. We don't want you to go on the internet and try to figure out these things for yourself, because Lord knows what kind of information you're going to find. Do your preparation first. And again, for people who are members of Law Shield, that means pick up the phone, call the business line, speak to the attorneys that you are for the state that you're traveling to, because they're going to be able to tell you exactly what's going on. I can't tell you how many times people have called me and they'll say, I'm on the road to New Jersey. I'm on the road to California. I've got my gun. What do I do when I'm there? That's already too late. So just be sure that you are taking the steps to get that legal education before you leave.
Got it. Emily, sticking with you in America, you're watching life after COVID-19 for responsible gun owners. I'm Sam Malone in Houston, Texas. On these questions, Jamal S. says, can you remind him the best way to, quote, handle a police car stop when you have your gun with you? Now, we're in Texas. Emily, give us your 2 cents.
Sure. So one thing to remember is, particularly if you're traveling, but even if you're just in your hometown, there are some police officers who are going to be happy that you're a licensed concealed carrier, you're a registered good guy, and they're going to treat you as such. There are some officers out there who are of the opinion that they are highly trained to carry weapons, and they're not really comfortable with civilians who carry weapons, and you don't know which officer is going to be knocking on your window. So be sure. Virtually across the country, if you have a license to carry, you have a, whatever it's called in your state, but you have got that handgun license and you have a handgun in the vehicle with you, you are virtually always going to be required to give the officer that license with your driver's license when you get pulled over. You should disclose where the weapon is. Do not point towards it, reach towards it. The officer will then play what we lovingly refer to as Simon Says in terms of how he wants to go about the rest of the interaction with you with your firearm. In most other circumstances, and again, state law varies, but your calm, cool demeanor, let's say you don't have a license to carry, it's just a normal traffic stop, but you are a Texas granny with 12 guns in the car, because that's how we roll down here in Texas. Do you have to affirmatively disclose those weapons? It's going to depend on your state, and you need to be sure that you know, if you're driving around with weapons, what that means. Here in Texas, absolutely not. If you don't have a license to carry, but you've got all your concealed weapons in the car, you don't need to bring that up until and unless you're asked. But you need to know what's going on in your state, because you don't want to unnecessarily complicate a traffic stop with an officer who happens to be one of those I don't like civilians to have guns officers. Wow.
Emily Taylor. Let's jump into Richard Hayes. Mr. Hayes, weren't you a prosecutor in Galveston County? Am I correct on that one?
I was, yes. I was a felony prosecutor down here in Galveston. And I will tell you, when it comes to license to carry holders, especially here in Texas, and I imagine it's this way across the United States, we are law-abiding people. They did a study here in Texas. LTC holders commit crimes at 1/5 the level of Texas peace officers. So we're really, like Emily said, registered good guys. And my experience, 9 times out of 10, police officers will tell you, hey, you know what? Don't reach for it. We're going to go through this. I'm going to write you a warning. I'm going to write you a ticket. As long as you don't reach towards it, we're not going to have any problems. That's been my personal experience, and that's the practical side of these things. Most police officers know that you do get a few bad apples, but I would say most of the time, as long as you're not making quick movements and things like that, acting cooperative, it's not going to be an issue.
America, you're watching Life After COVID-19 for Responsible Gun Owners. I'm Sam Malone, taking these questions that y'all have sent in. Mr. Hayes, staying with you, Vernon R. asks, what action should we take if authorities come knocking on my door claiming they have the dreaded red flag confiscation order? Mr. Hayes.
Yeah, this is a scary situation, and thankfully we don't have red flag orders here in Texas. And in states that do have them, they range from sworn statements by police officers in front of judges to anonymous tips over the phone, and so by an unrelated person. So it depends on your state. What I will tell you, and what any lawyer worth their salt will tell you, if the police come to your door with one of these red flag confiscation orders, the time to fight that is in court, not at your doorstep. Ask to see the order. Be calm, be polite. The police officers are wearing body cameras. They're wearing body-worn microphones. Their cars are recording. All those different recordings, that's the evidence that is going to show up. In all these states have a hearing a few days or a few weeks after the confiscation. That's the evidence the police is going to show the judge. So if you're, acting crazy, that's all the judge is going to see. He's not going to get to see the you going about your business the other 6 days of the week. They're going to see you losing your mind on those one body cameras, and it's a terrible time. And so it's almost a trap. But be calm, get a lawyer, fight this in court, don't fight it on your doorstep.
Emily Taylor, those words, be calm. I can't imagine you're minding your own business, watching something knock on the door, and they go, red flag, we're coming in. But once again, it's essential, as Mr. Hayes said, cameras, microphones on you.
Exactly. And, bear in mind, a lot of these orders are executed at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning. And so in addition to the fact that you are very quickly realizing someone has accused you of being dangerous and crazy, and then the government is there to take your firearms away, it might also be the first thing that's happened to you since you opened your eyes that morning. It is difficult to then say, oh, I'm going to be polite and calm. But you must, because Richard is absolutely right. When you have that hearing to, essentially have the judge say, yes, keep the guns, government, this guy is dangerous, or no, this guy is perfectly fine. Exhibit A is going to be that video of you saying, what are you doing here? Get off my property. And if you are justifiably angry, don't get me wrong, I would be furious. But that's going to be used as evidence against you. So I think it's a great question. If you are served with one of these orders, calm, cool, collected, you've got bulldog attorneys to fight that fight later. It is not your fight in the moment, trust me.
Emily Taylor, I can't imagine 5 a.m., 6 a.m., but it's essential, folks, and that's why we're talking to the experienced professionals, the independent program attorneys, U.S. Law Shield. Do you have your membership? Are you part of the 470 some odd thousand folks who have the card, who have the number on the back, that has the attorney answered emergency hotline 24/7, answered by an independent program attorney from your state? USLawShield.com, like it says on the screen, USLawShield.com. Join right now. And one more, Emily, let's stick with you. Brian K. I'm looking at the clock, so we'll make this the last of the selected questions from Brian K. If my carry permit expired during the COVID-19, do I have to stop carrying until the state opens up and they do the paperwork and they process my renewal? That's from Brian. What say you, Emily?
Oh, Brian, that's a really good question. It's something we're seeing quite a bit right now. And, you would think common sense wise, wow, I've been a licensed carrier for 10 years, 12 years, however long it's been. Surely, because I can't get my license renewed, I can still continue to carry because of these extenuating circumstances. Here's what I'll say. I have not heard of a single state that is either extending those overdue licenses while their governments are shut down, or who are allowing the unlicensed carry of firearms from people who were previously licensed. Almost every single, of course, if you live in a constitutional carry state, you don't need to worry about any of this, but those states that require a license for carry, what we're seeing is if you don't have a valid physical license with you, you are not going to be able to carry. And that's just one of those very unfortunate side effects of the government being either shut down or severely slowed.
That is horrible. Richard Hayes, final words on that question. Offices shut down. It expired. So sorry.
Well, I'll give some hope to our Texas folks. So in Texas, they driver's licenses, they said, all right, if these expired, we're going to give you a grace period. They didn't do the same thing with license to carry. So if your license to carry has expired here in Texas, you're out of luck. But I will tell you, the governor early on during this pandemic deemed the handgun licensing division essential. They are still processing renewals. They're still processing original applications. So Texans, if you're coming up, your birthday's coming up, time to get your renewal, submit your renewal, and hopefully it comes in time. Until then, everybody, you'd have to carry. If your license expired, you'd have to carry as if you're an unlicensed person. Most states allow you to carry in your car. So just temporarily, you'll have to just carry as if you're an unlicensed person until you get the new one in the mail.
Richard Hayes, excellent. Emily Taylor, excellent as always. Thank you so much for your insight. Thanks for these awesome answers. Appreciate all that you do for the members of U.S. Law Shield.
Oh, thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
You got it. And put that screen up on the camera one more time with the website so everyone can see. As we wrap up now, and don't worry, you can watch this again and again later to get the answers to your questions. Go online to the website, uslawshield.com. When you're a member, you got that 24/7, 365 access to the attorney answered emergency hotline, answered by an independent program attorney from your state. There's special member-only offers, there's events, there's discounts on classes, and of course you get seminars where you get FaceTime with experienced lawyers, instructors, industry professionals, and more. But mostly it's the peace of mind knowing that U.S. Law Shield is there when you need them. uslawshield.com. That wraps up our webinar for today. I'm Sam Malone. Thank you for watching us, and log on right now to uslawshield.com.